You beat 6 apocalypses across 6 different lifetimes, and Tamriel doesn't remember your name once. Every one of these heroes reaches the credits, gets folded back into legend, and vanishes from the record as if the saving never happened. If greatness always ends this way, something about being a hero here was never meant to be survived in the open. The Eternal Champion, the first hero. The Elder Scrolls ever gave you ended their story standing next to the most powerful man in the world and then walked straight off the map. That is not a small ending. In 1994, the nameless adventurer of Arena tore through an entire continent to track down Emperor Uriel Septim VII, locked away and replaced by the sorcerer Jagartharn. The champion won. They freed the Emperor, exposed the imposter, and got rewarded with a permanent seat at Uriel Septim's side. Zero ambiguity there. This is a hero who finished the job with a direct line to the Imperial throne, the kind of ending that should guarantee your name gets carved into every history book Tamriel ever writes. It didn't. Walk into any Elder Scrolls game released after Arena and ask a single guard, scholar, or court historian about the person who saved Uriel Septim's life and reinstalled him on the throne. Nothing. 0 confirmed mentions, 0 cameos, 0 letters signed with their name. The Eternal Champion doesn't get a statue. They don't get a grave. They don't even get a rumor. Bethesda built an entire hero around Imperial proximity, gave that hero the closest possible seat to the Empire's power, and then simply never picked the thread back up. There's no canonical city they retired to, no later title they earned, no year they died, no scrap of paperwork with their name on it anywhere in Tamriel's records, and that name starts to feel like the joke nobody's laughing at, Eternal. Except Eternal turned out to mean the exact opposite of remembered. This is a person who presumably wanted to matter, who fought their way across a continent and into the Emperor's inner circle specifically to make sure they mattered, and the world simply closed back up around the empty space where they used to stand. Not erased, just quietly, completely unmentioned, like the Empire filed the whole thing away and lost the folder. That's the trade every one of these saviors seems to make without ever being told the terms up front. You bleed for Tamriel, you save the Emperor's life, you win the unwinnable fight, and Tamriel forgets your name by the sequel anyway. But at least this hero got one clear ending to disappear from. The next one was handed several endings at once, and none of them could even agree on whether the hero survived to be forgotten in the first place. The Agent. Most heroes vanish because we stopped watching. The Agent vanished because the game itself couldn't decide what happened to them. That's not a gap in the historical record. That's the historical record actively arguing with itself. The Elder Scrolls II. Daggerfall came out in 1996, and it handed players one of the strangest endings in gaming history. A finale that forks into multiple mutually incompatible outcomes, and every single one of them is treated as equally legitimate. Think about what that actually means. Nothing in canon confirms exactly where any of them leave the Agent long-term, but follow the pattern of what the branches imply. One path suggests the Agent dying in Aetherius, a plane of existence beyond mortal reality itself, not a battlefield, not a dungeon, a completely different realm of being, gone. Another path implies the Agent walking away alive, mission complete, business as usual. Both of these are canon. Neither cancels the other out. Somewhere in Tamriel's official history, the same person might be simultaneously gone from the world and having breakfast. Try applying that logic anywhere else. Imagine asking a coworker what happened to Gary from accounting and getting told he either retired to Florida or ascended into a higher plane of existence, pick whichever one you like better. Nobody would accept that as an answer. Tamriel accepts it as history, and it gets stranger the longer you look. 0 mainline Elder Scrolls game after Daggerfall clearly references the Agent's fate. Not a memorial, not a rumor, not a throwaway line of dialogue confirming which ending stuck. The trail doesn't fade out gradually the way these things usually do. It just stops, right at the exact moment the story splits. This is where the pattern stops looking like an accident. The first vanishing looked like carelessness, a hero simply lost to time. This one is engineered. Bethesda didn't fail to write a follow-up. They built unresolvability directly into the source material, then never touched it again. Fans still argue over which ending should count as the real one, but that argument misses the point entirely. The ambiguity isn't a bug fans are debating around, it's the actual design. Somewhere underneath all of that is a person who did the impossible, who bled for a kingdom, who earned an ending, any ending, and got handed several contradictory ones instead. That's the cost nobody warns you about when you become a legend in this world. You don't get a monument. You get a paradox. Contradiction is one way to lose a hero, but the next legend didn't get contradictory endings. They got a single rumor that shipped one of Tamriel's most mythic figures clean off the edge of the known world. The Nerevarine. A god walked among mortals in Morrowind, and Tamriel's best guess at where he went next is a rumor with a boat in it. That should bother you more than it does. The Nerevarine is not just some wanderer who happened to save a province from a volcano and a corrupted god. This is a confirmed reincarnation of Indoril Nerevar, an ancient hero woven directly into the actual religion of the land, and the game states that outright. No vague prophecy. No fan reading between the lines, no community theory stitched together from item descriptions. Canon says the person you played is the literal second coming of a legend, walking around in 2002's Morrowind, doing fetch quests and killing gods on a Tuesday, and then the record just stops. The last thing anyone claims to know is a whisper that the Nerevarine sailed east toward Akavir, the continent past the edge of the map that most of Tamriel treats like a ghost story. Nobody confirms it happened. No cutscene, no letter, no burial site, no grand farewell speech. Just a rumor repeated enough times across enough generations that people started treating it like an ending anyway. Nothing in canon locks this down as fact, but follow where the pattern points. A mythic reincarnated hero, a mysterious foreign continent nobody returns from, and a total refusal by the writers to ever close the loop. That is not an accident. That is a choice dressed up as folklore. The cruelest part is what happens after. Roughly 200 years pass, entire eras rise and fall, empires collapse and rebuild, and people are still bringing up the Nerevarine like an unsolved case file, not as ancient history nobody remembers, the way the agent gets treated, as an active, ongoing question that the world itself keeps failing to answer. Somewhere in Tamriel right now, someone is still asking whatever happened to that guy, and nobody has a better answer than a 200-year-old rumor about a boat. Think about what that actually means for the person underneath the title. You built this character stat by stat, choice by choice, favor by favor with the great houses, right up to becoming a walking prophecy, and the prize for doing it better than literally anyone else in the province is disappearing so completely that even legend can't pin you down. The agent got buried under bad writing and contradictions. The Nerevarine did not even get that dignity. They got mythologized straight into the fog, and it turns out the more godlike a hero becomes, the less anyone bothers writing down what happened to the human part still standing inside the legend. Every hero so far has vanished into fog, rumor, or contradiction, but one of them did the exact opposite. They got the most thoroughly documented ending in the entire series, and somehow that is stranger than being lost. The hero of Kvatch, 1 hero out of 6, actually gets an ending. The catch is that ending required them to stop being a person entirely. Everyone else on this list just disappears. No grave, no rumor, no final sighting. The hero of Kvatch is different, and that difference should feel like relief right up until you notice what it actually cost. The surface story is simple enough. Some nameless prisoner gets dragged out of a cell in the Imperial City, handed a shot at saving Tamriel from an oblivion crisis, and actually pulls it off. Closes gates, kills a prince's champion, watches an emperor die in their arms. That part reads like a fairy tale. Prisoner becomes savior. Roll credits. Except Bethesda didn't stop there. Head into the Shivering Isles, and the paperwork changes completely. The hero doesn't just visit Sheogorath's realm as a tourist. They get handed the throne. Every quest in that expansion, every mad prophecy, every unhinged piece of dialogue, all of it points at the same outcome. By the end, the hero of Kvatch isn't a hero anymore. They're the Daedric Prince of Madness, ruler of an entire plane of oblivion, a being older and stranger than mortal time is supposed to allow. That's not a theory whispered on a forum somewhere. That's the confirmed ending. In-game text treats it as settled fact, later material builds directly on top of it, and the throne stays occupied by exactly one name. Compare that to the Nerevarine wandering off into unmapped rock, or the vestige just fading out of the record entirely, and the contrast starts to feel almost rude. One hero gets a documented afterlife, the rest get silence. Fans still argue about how literally to take it. Is the hero genuinely wearing Sheogorath's face now? Memories and personality fused into something that isn't human anymore? Or is this more symbolic, a story about a mortal absorbing a role until the role and the person become impossible to pull apart? Nothing in the game's hedges on this one. The text is direct, the sequel's treated as settled, and every scrap of evidence lines up in the same direction. The ascension is literal. The prisoner who wanted a second chance at life got one, just not as themselves. And that's the part worth sitting with for a second. Somebody poured everything into that character. Every gate closed, every side quest finished, every relationship built in that world, all of it belonging to a person who wanted to matter in Tamriel specifically, as themselves, in their own name. Instead, they got written out of Tamriel completely and filed under Daedra. The one protagonist Bethesda actually bothered to track down is also the one who had to surrender being mortal just to earn the paperwork. So one hero escaped the Vanishing Act by becoming a god. That should be the happy version of this list, the one exception that proves the rule wrong, but the most recent legend hasn't been given any fate at all. Not a grave, not a rumor, not a throne, because their story is still holding its breath, waiting on a game that hasn't come out yet. The Last Dragonborn. The most played hero in the history of this franchise has a file so empty it might as well not exist. Millions of people became this character. Millions of people killed Alduin, absorbed his soul on top of that mountain, and watched the credits roll believing they had just finished someone's story. They hadn't. Skyrim came out in 2011, and over a decade later, Bethesda still has not told a single soul what happened to the Dragonborn after that fight. No death, no shrine, no divine promotion. Zero. Compare that to everyone you have already met in this list. Every fate we've covered so far, even the ones swallowed by silence, eventually got something. A rumor, a cult, a throne, a godhood. The pattern up to this point looked like Bethesda tracks exactly one outcome for its heroes, the leap to divinity, and buries everything else. The Last Dragonborn breaks that pattern completely. This isn't a hero from an old game nobody revisits anymore. This is the character an entire generation of players is still actively logging hours as right now, and the silence around them isn't old, it's current. That's the part that should bother you. This isn't neglect. The Elder Scrolls 6 doesn't exist yet, which means Bethesda hasn't forgotten to write an ending. They've simply chosen not to write one yet, on purpose, while the door stays open for a sequel that could still walk through it. Fans have filled the gap the same way they always do. The louder theory says the Dragonborn didn't retire at all, that they're trapped in Apocrypha, serving Hermaeus Mora after everything that happened during the Black Book questline. It's a fun idea, it is also built on exactly one questline and nothing else. Nothing in canon confirms the Dragonborn ever went back to that realm, let alone stayed there, so treat this one as a hope dressed up as a clue rather than an actual trail. The quieter, far safer read is much less exciting. The Dragonborn is not imprisoned anywhere, they are not serving anyone, they're just gone, sitting in the same narrative limbo as everyone else on this list, waiting for Bethesda to decide they matter again. Think about what that means for the person who actually played this. You didn't just watch this story, you built it, choice by choice, for 100 hours or more, and the reward for finishing it was total silence. Not a legacy, not a grave, not even a rumor in a tavern, just nothing, indefinitely. Every hero so far had a story that ended, then a fate that either vanished or transcended. But one protagonist doesn't fit that shape at all, because their story never actually stopped, and it's still being written right now. The Vestige. Here's the one hero on this entire list you could actually go find right now. Load up the game, make your way to any major hub in Tamriel, and there they are, still walking around, still taking quests, still very much a known quantity, which sounds like it breaks everything this video just spent 5 sections proving. It doesn't. It proves the opposite. The Vestige is the protagonist of The Elder Scrolls Online, launched in 2014, and unlike every offline hero before them, their story was never built to have an ending. It's an MMO, it runs on branching quests, chapter arcs, and expansions that keep landing years after launch, with no finish line built into the design. There's no credits screen that locks the character into a finished state, because the writers are still actively writing new chapters for them today. That's not a coincidence. That's the entire mechanism. That's the whole trick, actually. You can find the Vestige, because the Vestige never got the chance to finish. Compare that to what you just watched happen 5 times in a row across this video. A hero completes their arc, the game ends, and Tamriel immediately starts treating them like folklore instead of a person. The Nerevarine closes a prophecy and gets swallowed whole by it. The Dragonborn slays Alduin and promptly becomes a rumor other characters argue about in taverns they'll never walk into again. Finishing the story was never the reward for any of them. Finishing the story was the erasure event. The Vestige just hasn't triggered it yet. Players notice this too. There's a running argument in the community about whether the vestige even qualifies for a "where are they now" conversation at all, since there technically is no now to check in on. Their fate is still being written in real time, tied directly to whatever Bethesda ships next, which means any claim about where they end up has to stay honest about one thing: nobody actually knows, because nobody's finished the book yet. Not the players, not the writers. And that's not a loophole in the pattern, it's the pattern with the mask completely off. Think about what that actually means for you, the player, sitting behind that vestige's eyes for hundreds of hours. The only way to stay visible in this world is to never actually complete the thing you set out to do. The moment you do, Tamriel stops keeping tabs on you and starts building a legend instead, brick by brick, whether you asked for one or not. Staying found and staying human turn out to be the exact same condition, and the second you cross the finish line, you lose both of them at once. So the pattern is clear now. The oldest heroes on this list didn't disappear by accident or bad writing. They disappeared because finishing the job was always the trigger, every single time, dressed up as a happy ending. But those three didn't just fade the same way, and looking at them side by side reveals the vanishing was never a bug in the writing at all. The Vanished Legends, 3 heroes, 3 separate games, 1 identical ending. Nobody in Tamriel can tell you what happened to any of them. That is not bad luck. That is not 3 separate writers forgetting 3 separate loose ends. That is a pattern. And once you see it stacked up like this, it stops looking like an accident and starts looking like policy. Start with the Eternal Champion. This is the person who recovered the Staff of Chaos, unraveled Jagar Tharn's decade-long impersonation of the Emperor, and stood at the Emperor's side as the literal savior of the Empire, and then nothing. No mainline game ever brings them back on stage. No named cameo, no confirmed retirement, no grave. The single most decorated hero in the Empire's recent history just stops being mentioned, as if the credits rolled and someone unplugged the whole timeline. Now the Agent. Their ending genuinely cannot be pinned down, and not because Bethesda lost the file. Daggerfall's finale branches into multiple mutually exclusive outcomes depending on choices you made, which means there is no single canonical agent to track in the first place. You didn't just lose the hero. The game made it structurally impossible to know which hero you'd even be looking for. Then the Nerevarine, reincarnated God King of Morrowind, the one figure with the strongest claim to actual divinity on this list, and their last documented lead is a rumor. Not a decree, not a sighting, a rumor that they sailed east toward Akavir. That's it. That's the paper trail for a living god. Here's what earlier vanishings only hinted at, and this one confirms outright. You spend 100 hours becoming each of these people. You carry their armor, their choices, their name through an entire war, and the world's reward is silence. The Empire remembers Tiber Septim in statues and holidays. It can't tell you where the man who saved it twice went for lunch. Compare that to how modern Elder Scrolls handles its protagonists, and the gap gets uncomfortable fast. Newer games love a proper send-off. A statue with your name engraved on it, a letter waiting for you, a title that follows you into legend. The earliest 3 got none of that, and the usual excuse is technical limitation, early engines, smaller teams, no budget for a real ending. That excuse gets thinner every time you stack another hero onto the pile. 3 disappearances from 3 different eras of development, 3 different writing teams, 3 different game structures, all landing on the exact same silence. Technical limitation explains one accident. It does not explain a policy that survives across nearly a decade of Bethesda actually improving their tools. But if the earliest heroes vanished into legend, the newest ones did something different. One became a god. One is frozen mid-sentence, one never stopped, and putting those against the vanished ones finally reveals what the disappearing was actually for. The pattern revealed. One of these 6 heroes has a documented, confirmed, canon-approved ending. Just one. Everyone assumes that is the lucky one. It is actually the exception that proves the rule. The hero of Kvatch closed the Oblivion Crisis, then walked into the Shivering Isles, and eventually became Sheogorath, the Daedric Prince of Madness. That is not a retirement. That is not a grave with a name on it. Tamriel had exactly one chance to let a legend die as a person, and instead it turned him into a god who runs his own dimension of reality. Even the one ending we actually have refuses to be a mortal ending. Now put the other 2 next to it. The Last Dragonborn has no confirmed fate at all, because the timeline simply has not caught up. No future game has been set far enough past Skyrim to say what happened, so the silence is not an oversight, it is a placeholder with the door bolted open. And the vestige never stops moving because Elder Scrolls Online is still being written right now, chapter after chapter, so there is no ending because the story is still being sold to you. 3 completely different mechanisms. Divine ascension, deliberate silence, ongoing serialization, same result every time, 0 graves. That is the part that should bother you. Across every hero this video has covered, Tamriel had dozens of opportunities to just say, and then she grew old and died in Cheydinhal, and it never once takes them. The pattern is not an accident of scattered writers across 2 decades. It is a rule the franchise follows as strictly as any rule it has. You already saw the mechanism at work with the vanished legends, walking off the map into rumor and folktale instead of an epilogue. This is why. A hero with a headstone is a hero with an ending, and an ending is small. It fits in one sentence. It closes the book. Ascension makes you a myth, ambiguity makes you a mystery, and an ongoing storyline makes you immortal by simply refusing to stop. All 3 are the same decision, wearing different clothes. You poured 100 hours into becoming someone who saved a province, an empire, a plane of reality, and the world's answer to that sacrifice was never a monument with your name spelled correctly. It was to make sure nobody could ever confirm you were mortal to begin with. The disappearing was never the loose end. It was the reward. A hero who gets a documented grave becomes a footnote, but a hero who vanishes becomes a god the way Tamriel makes gods, by never confirming they were ever mortal at all. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.